Welcome everyone to Have History Will Travel. I am your host, the Wilder Historian, and a few weeks ago I posted in the community on YouTube and asked for questions you have for me pertaining to history or to myself, and many of you commented. Thank you so much for the questions. In this video, I'll be answering those questions. Zechariah asked, are you related to anyone in the Civil War? In short, yes, I do have ancestors who fought in the Civil War. 3 of my direct ancestors fought, one in the Confederate Army in the 25th Virginia Cavalry, and 2 in the Union Army, one in the 1st Tennessee Light Artillery, and one in the 2nd North Carolina Mounted Infantry. However, I may be reading too much into this question, but with the name like Wilder, I'll always get the question, are you related to John T. Wilder of Wilder's Lightning Brigade fame? Yes, but in a roundabout way. To find a common ancestor with him, I have to go all the way back to England before our ancestors came to North America, so no direct lineage. Michael asked, what if Sherman didn't take Atlanta until after the 1864 election, seemingly paving the way for McClellan to win the election? Shelby Foote stated once that the North had such great resources and manpower that the South really never had a chance. However, I feel as though this disregards the power of politics and the negative attitude toward the war developed after various Confederate wins. This could be a long video by itself, but let's look at that first question. If Sherman hadn't captured Atlanta by the time of the 1864 election, would McClellan have been elected, and what would have happened? Some of my subscribers have already answered how I would have answered for the most part. If McClellan had been elected, Abraham Lincoln would have still been president until the beginning of March, and by that point it was just a matter of time before the Confederacy was to be defeated, and McClellan as president would not have changed that. However, I am not totally convinced that Atlanta had that much of an impact on the election. It's an oft-stated opinion, but I am not completely convinced. B. Johnson asked, what do you think would have happened if Lee would have went west with his army, as Jefferson Davis suggested before Lee began his second invasion of the North, given that in real time Chickamauga was a defeat for the North, and many believe it was due to Longstreet and part of the Army of Northern Virginia being there? Also, does your lineage go back to the Confederacy or the Yankees? Thank you, and thank you for the videos. I always learn something from them. I'll answer the last question first. I answered that one earlier in the video, and even though I was born and raised in Virginia and still live there, and my family have been there in that same area since a little after the American Revolution, I live nearly within a stone's throw of the Tennessee line, specifically East Tennessee, which was very pro-Union during the war, so that's why I have ancestors on both sides. Now to the first question, what if Lee had went west with his army? I don't see how that would have been feasibly possible with the Army of the Potomac still intact. Now, if Lee went just himself and took the command of the Confederate Army in the West, there definitely would have been a more aggressive campaign in the West. I assume that Lee would have continued to use his old tactics of dividing his force to lure Rosecrans out of the Nashville area in an attempt to defeat his army in detail. I don't think it would be a shock that I think Lee was a more competent commander than Bragg, but I will leave the guessing game at that. However, I will say that one thing I am completely confident of. If Lee just himself comes west, the morale of the Army of Tennessee would have been bolstered tremendously. The Confederacy lived and died with the defeats and victories of Lee and his Army of Northern Virginia. His successes endeared him to the people of the South, and simply his presence would have made the men in the Army more confident. Steve asked, after obtaining your doctorates, do you have the desire to study other military topics like the Great War? My doctorate will be focused on the Civil War, but the note of excellence that I chose to enter into at Mississippi State is military history. So I love all military history, but I know more about the Civil War. However, as the channel progresses, I will be venturing out into other historical time periods and subjects. I do have one video on the First World War, and it is about the Christmas truce. Scott asked, how do you think things would have turned out if Lee followed Longstreet's suggestion to not fight at Gettysburg? Ultimately, if he had, it would have still been an aggressive campaign because that was Lee's style. He possibly would have disengaged, made Lee come after him, and again try to defeat the Union Army in detail somewhere else on the campaign. However, as I stated in my counterfactual history video on if Stonewall Jackson had survived, I don't think it would have changed much about the outcome of the war at that point. Tracy asked, do you plan on doing any more biographies? I'm enjoying the one on Hancock, and the one on Polk was fascinating. If you plan on doing some more biographies, which officers would you choose? I find all the officers interesting, but I would love to see one on Beauregard, Buford, Forrest, and Reynolds. After I finish with the Hancock biography, I'm debating on which one to do next. I'm thinking either George Thomas or Joseph E. Johnston, but that may change. I'm loving doing the biographies. I'm learning right there along with you, and I think it's integral to understand the pre- and post-war years of these gentlemen to fully grasp the Civil War. Brian asked, as a Citadel graduate, I would love to see a video on all of the various military academies in the South and their various participation in the Civil War. The Citadel, VMI, the Arsenal, etc., etc. They even had a naval academy for a while. A video on the various academies would be fun. One of the commenters on my first Hancock video asked if I would do a day in the life of a West Point cadet. I think that is a great idea, but I would expand it to incorporate the entire West Point career of a cadet. There are a lot of books about West Point out there, and it will take a lot of research to put that one together, so it will take a while to do it. However, I do feel that telling the individual stories of Civil War commanders and their time at West Point tells us a whole lot about the cadet life and the different experiences of these young men. So in short, yes, I will eventually get there. I am a one-man operation, so these videos take a while for me to create, but I endeavor to try to bring you all the stuff you request. Thank you all so much for the questions. I want to do this again sometime very soon. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time.